I'm so excited to be back with my friends at User Interviews. As Ben mentioned, I'm Roberta. I am the founder and leadership coach at Learn Mindfully, and I'm also a research partner at Maze currently. I am joined today by a few amazing people. We have Holly Cole, who is the CEO of the Research Ops community and Research Operations Manager at Cisco. Alec Levin, who is the co-founder and CEO at Learners, and Emily Tate, who is the managing director at Mind the Product and founding member of Chief UK. Would love to kind of kick things off for this panel today for each of you to just share a little bit more about the communities you're supporting and coordinating. Holly, if you'd like to go first, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
So I own and run the research operations community as it stands today, the Research Ops community. That's a large community based on Slack, where we talk about really facilitating research, scaling research. What are the tasks that need to be done in order to make research better and more impactful throughout organizations, and to just make sure that people go to work, feel like they know what they're doing, and get to go home in a good mood.
Thanks, Holly. Alec, would love to hear a little bit more about Learners.
Hey, folks. So I'm Alec from Learners. For those of you who don't know, Learners is, I think, probably the largest community for researchers and expanding soon to other disciplines as well. And our focus is on creating really meaningful and financially accessible learning experiences for people. So we're running about a dozen events between March and June, focusing on all different parts of research and a couple design things as well, that are all free to tune into remotely. And if you want to come out, there's usually an affordable ticket if you want to come in person. And yeah, we're just really passionate about giving a platform and microphone to a bunch of folks that don't usually share all the wonderful things that they learn when they're so focused and heads down on the work that they do every day. And our focus is on encouraging them and giving them the opportunity to kind of come out and talk about those interesting learnings.
Awesome. Thanks, Alec. And Emily, we'd love to hear about your amazing work at Mind the Product and Chief.
Yeah, so Mind the Product is a global community of product people. I'm actually a former managing director. I just left a couple months ago, but still super proud of the work that the team is doing and the things that they have going on. So Mind the Product has been around for over a decade, aiming to help product managers of all stripes come together and grow the craft and learn how to be better at what they do. So there's blogs and articles that are put out every day, podcasts, conferences, training that you can do, all sorts of activities to help learn more about product management and where product is today. I will lightly plug on behalf of the team. If you are in Europe, there's a roadshow that is happening this summer in London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. So feel free to join us at that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. We have such a unique mix of backgrounds here today. So research ops, user research, product. I am an odd bird in that I've worn every single one of those hats over the last 10 years personally. I'm curious with just like the moment that has been happening really for the last few years. There's been so much change from COVID to just markets changing, lots of shifts. There's lots of uncertainty in our disciplines, in our respective disciplines. I'm curious if any of you would love to be able to describe what's happening. What's your perspective of what's happening? Holly.
I kind of feel like there's a lot of business decisions that are being made, and those things aren't always well explained to anyone in an organization. But a lot of what I see happening is business needs doers. They need people who are going to, coordinate the doers, make the stuff and push it out. And research and operations work, research related or otherwise, different types of operations work, are kind of outside of that. And those get hit a lot harder in my experience, those things that aren't part of the doing. And as that has trickled down and spread out, that's hit a lot of UX to me and its associated places like mine.
Yeah. I always describe like anything operationally, really. It could be research ops, product ops. it's like an iceberg, right? You only see the top of like the outcomes typically. And the research ops work is really behind the curtain. It's the method behind the madness. And so it's unfortunate to see those roles being hit really hard over the last few months and years.
They cut DevOps.
Yeah.
They will release DevOps people, but not, developers who are working on things that face customers. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think in any of these roles that frankly are hard to justify some of the ROI. So there's not as a direct line between the kind of input of people and the output of units shipped or dollars, dollars coming in the door or whatever it may be. Those are the roles that now we are kind of, obviously have left the era of zero interest rates and free money and just like hire and do all the things and burn money to growth. Now that we're in more of an efficiency mindset and people are really looking at, okay, what do we need? What is the bare minimum that this organization needs to keep the growth trajectory that we're having? And oftentimes it is roles like product and research and UX and things that we inherently know are really important and we know are adding a lot of value, but they're basically value multiplier type roles rather than baseline must-have need in the organization. And so to the people who are making those decisions, they don't necessarily understand. And we, I think, as a community, haven't been great at articulating exactly what the value is and how we contribute. We've kind of done a bit of like, just trust us. We promise we're important. We know we're really good. Or kind of, I would say at some points, even almost overselling what we do in ways of like, you will fail if you are not, properly managing your roadmap, properly doing research, doing all these things by the book. And then people look at it and go, well, that's not true. And so it makes it really easy to discount the value that these kinds of roles provide.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing from you in that, Emily, is that like because of businesses being very much in the let's stabilize, let's really come from like an angle of safety for growth moving forward because there's so much risk and uncertainty going on. It's like, what's the skeleton crew that we can operate at when it comes to the business? And what's like a nice to have, not a need to have? And it sounds like some research ops roles, type roles are kind of falling into that bucket, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Alec, I'm curious your perspective because I know you have strong opinions about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both Emily and Holly are bringing up some good points. I think I'd challenge to take it even a little bit further. There's a friend of mine who's previously was director of research somewhere, and she's had this company value that just keeps sticking with me that I think is important in times like these, which is, she says, her name's Lena, and one of their values was listen to the wisdom of the system, right? And a lot of times when researchers come into new roles, they're really excited to have an impact. They want to figure out all the things that are wrong and that are not working and give feedback. And so they come in and they sometimes alienate themselves with a bunch of negative feedback about things, and they haven't built a trusted relationship for people to know that they want to help. And the thinking behind it is, look, things are working already to some extent. You're here to make things better. And so like the fact that there's already something working, just pause and try and observe and understand what this system, which is this organization, the fact that it's functioning is telling you something. And I think that we can apply that principle as well to the situation that we find ourselves in with employment too. And of course, there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of how we communicate the value that we bring to the table. But I would also say, perhaps a lot of the things that we've been doing and working on, maybe some of them were not that valuable in the first place. And so I think it's an important moment of self-reflection, and it's not to be hard on ourselves or whatnot, but if you challenge, I think most folks in our field to articulate in very clear terms, dollars and cents, how their employment is actually materially improving the business from a growth or profit point of view. Very, very difficult. Can you point to projects that you've done that have materially done those things? And I think a big part of it is that we don't even understand how these systems and organizations work. We're not interested in learning about money, talking about money. We're not interested in understanding the pressures that an executive team or a board of directors are under. And that really undermines us, right? And the clues are all around us. You can, if you work at a big company, there are public filings that you can read. If you work at a small company, you probably have all hands where they tell you what they're worried about every week. And so I think, for sure what Emily and Holly are saying are correct, but I feel like, the system is trying to tell us something right now about the work that we've been doing for the past few years. And if we want to put ourselves in a much better position for success, which we have the skills to do, we should really be reflecting on whether or not the work that we've been doing has also been pointed in a very productive direction.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm hearing from you, Alec, is the importance of business skills. And I often talk about this with coaching clients and even some of our clients at Maze. I didn't wake up, like, I'm a researcher by nature. I'm empathetic by nature. I didn't wake up wanting to talk about sales, revenue, ROI, or anything like that. But it's a skill that I've had to learn as in my last few roles. At user interviews, I reported into the CEO. In my current role, I report into the VP of revenue. And so it is uncomfortable, but there is value in learning these different types of skills. It is a muscle that we can learn. It is just that, a skill. So thanks for sharing that perspective. I'm curious a little bit about there's a lot of noise going on at the same time. Like, we're hearing about all these changes. How do we separate the signal from the noise? What should we absolutely not be paying attention to with the current market and what's going on?
Well, maybe I can jump in. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Take it away, Alec.
Well, okay, well, I'll just piggyback on what I was saying before. But Roberta, in your experience with your coaching practice, I imagine you have revenues and you have expenses and you have marketing costs and you have all these different things. And through that experience, I bet you've learned a tremendous amount about, if you were to go back and do research full-time kind of in-house, of what it takes to really support the people around you and do research in a way that drives those numbers that are really important. And I think there's a lot of discussion around, how it's frustrating where there's tons of applicants for different roles. There is, there's tons of, there's frustrating hiring practices. I talk to people regularly about this stuff. And one of the things that I remember someone telling me was, they got through to the final stage of the hiring process, and they thought it went well, and they said they'll let them know there's no next steps. They're just waiting, and it's been a week and a half. And I told them they're waiting because they think there's someone better than you, right? And that's super frustrating, right? That's happening to them. And I think, again, we can't control those hiring managers. We can't control what's going on in public markets. We can't control those things, but what we can control is the type of work that we do, especially when we're not full-time employees, right? You can pick up contract work. You can go and try and generate some business for yourself. You'll learn a ton of skills doing that. And so, I think focusing on what is within your control. You cannot control how many job postings are out there, but you definitely can go. And if you believe in the power of research, which I think we all do, we know there's benefits to doing this stuff. Why can't you go and turn yourself into a bit of a business there? You will learn a ton of stuff. And I bet, Roberta, you'd be the first to say that, like, if you were to go out into the field now, having done what you've done, you'd have a much easier time landing that role than, say, before you had this experience. So I think it ties in. It's not about what's noise and what's going on right now. Let's go back to first principles. Foundational layer of, we're here, they give us money, we give them our expertise and labor, which translates into more money and growth, right? So what are the things that translate into that? If we focus on those things, we're gonna have a much easier time when we're interviewing and when we're trying to land our next job.
Agreed. Yeah, it is the system that we operate in is capitalism. And part of that is understanding the language of the business and being able to prove the value. Because when we talk about ROI, that's what we're talking about. Or when we talk about impact of research or impact of product, we're actually talking about value. We're using those terms interchangeably. And so it really does come back to, we are adding value to the business, to clients, to customers who are purchasing the products, and also value to our stakeholders internally, and being able to convey and speak about that in a way with them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll add on one little thing to what Alex said, and then I have kind of a different noise to block out. So having just been through a job search myself, and I'm in a group of kind of senior product leaders that are all job searching. For those of you out there who are job searching, I know how hard it is and I know how exhausting it is. But I just also want you to remember that when you do get to that final stage and you get to that spot where it's like, okay, we're just waiting on waiting on an offer, or you're in the final two and it doesn't go your way, know that it's not because you aren't valuable and that it's not because you are never going to find another role. It's half the time it literally is. They've got 2 or 3 really great candidates and they have to pick one. And so sometimes that will go your way, sometimes it won't, but just keep pushing, and I promise you it will come. You will not be unemployed forever. The other kind of, on the original question of kind of what's the noise that I think needs to be ignored, is I feel like there's a lot of noise right now, especially in the like LinkedIn thought leader world, that is basically just dogma around practices and like the right way to do product or research or design or whatever it may be. And people are kind of like getting in their corners, and then it's like an interview will happen on Lenny's podcast and everyone will be up in arms for a few days, and then someone else will make a statement and everyone will be up in arms for a few days. And honestly, like, I think that is probably the most unhelpful thing that is happening right now, is just so much noise around this person's right, this person's wrong, or, even just kind of like, there's only one right way to do this. I think we all know, those of us who have been doing any role in product or designer research know there is not one right way to do anything. And there's not a single best way. It depends on your company. It depends on the project you're working on. It depends on the question you're trying to answer at the moment. And I think we waste a lot of thought cycles in the like, who's right, who's wrong. And so the more that you can, like, take the things that are useful out of those conversations and dismiss the drama. The drama is more entertaining, I will say. Like, it's fun to kind of get the popcorn out and look at the comment sections on some of these things, but it's not actually helping, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Emily. I absolutely agree. And the words that I end up using a lot, it's so funny. I often describe a bubble, like putting myself in a bubble, because like at heart, I am an introvert. I am a researcher. I like being under the radar, going deep into things. And so it's like, how can you protect your peace? And it's really almost a form of self-care to be able to shut out the noise and focus again on what Alec mentioned, which is what are you in control of? We are always at choice and in control of something. And so that's kind of the theme that I'm hearing from folks as well. Holly, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
It is 100% something that you should do for self-care, is to turn off today's most popular social media trend app, LinkedIn. Like, you're not going to find, really, the chances that you find a role on LinkedIn are low. And yes, there's great networking and there's great conversations to be had. It is not something that should be stressing you out, just like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok should not be stressing you out. If it is, set it down. The thing that I will say about like all of this, is this the death of this or the death of that? When I was at iCIMS, which is the big applicant tracking company, we talked often about hiring markets or candidate markets, and that they ebb and flow, generally following the economy. There was a hiring market after the real estate boom crash, and we're in it again. That means that, companies can be very picky and choosy because there's a lot of people in the market and they don't have to. As a result, they leave a lot of roles open, not just because they can be picky about people, but because budgets are tight. And if they close that role, that hiring manager doesn't know if they're going to get that role back in the next 3 years. They have no idea. So they keep it open and they continue to interview. So if you've been interviewed for a role that popped up again in 1 or 2 months, you're hearing that thing, that's what that is. That's somebody hoping against hope that they can keep this role because they can't fund it right now, but they've been given permission to put it out there at some point. Ugh. There's a lot of things
my favorite was seeing a role I literally had an interview for that afternoon reposted that morning on LinkedIn, which was amusing. So
the automatic repost function of ISIMs, Greenhouse, Lever, all of them. And it just keeps it alive. Yeah, step away from LinkedIn. Don't get into it that much, but you do need to market yourself. You do need to market yourself, and you need to market yourself as not ascribing to one thing or another, but the things that you like to do, the things that you're good at, talk about them and share how you've influenced a business before.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Holly. When I do work with coaching clients, I often will walk them through an activity where we look into their career journey because everyone's path is so different and unique. My path is, I call it windy. I was a learning experience designer turned product manager, turned user researcher, turned coach. And so like, it is not necessarily describing each of those steps to people, but being able to zoom out and see the guiding threads and be able to convey that story. Some questions I often give people is just as simple as what gives you energy at work, being able to tune into that, tap into that. What's your superpower? We all have things that we can do at work, but do we want to do it? You'll know when you're in a meeting and your energy is being drained from your body. You know when you'll be excited about something, and so follow that. That's your intuition. But at the same time, there are also skills that you can continue to grow to further within your practice, whether it's research ops, or product. I did want to circle back to something that Emily mentioned earlier about the pitting against each other. I have been seeing this discourse a little bit on LinkedIn. One being a lot of people on this call are researchers. There was a Judd Anton article that came out, I believe, last summer that was talking about the research reckoning is here. Almost every single one of my coaching clients came in that week saying, oh my God, I don't know if I have a role as a researcher anymore. And just completely starting to second guess their superpowers, their path. I'm curious, how do each of you kind of delineate between these different practices? What's the difference between a researcher versus a product manager versus research ops when it comes to the types of outcomes that you're focused on? Because they are definitely different, but related in some ways.
I'll jump in from the product perspective, because I know that a lot of the drama right now is like, is product just taking over research and getting all the researchers fired? And I think any product manager who has worked with a really good researcher knows that we could not replace research. And now part of this is that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to work with a really good researcher. And so they're doing what they can to, kind of try to take on the principles of, we want to hear from customers, we want to understand, we want to live in the problem space for a bit, and rather than jumping straight to solutions. And I think all of that is really, really valuable. I think when it comes to actual, I know there's lots of questions around democratization of research, and is that okay? Should only researchers be allowed to research? Some of those types of conversations. This is my opinion, just from having worked with researchers, worked as a product person without researchers, and every aspect in between. I do think that democratization is a good thing, but I think it's a matter of how it's done and what kinds of things are being democratized. So we all know, obviously in research, you start with a research question. There are some research questions that are not so complex that me with a decent understanding of research and research principles couldn't successfully do that without that, harming anything, or, and getting quick answers to some questions. There are also things that I know, bigger questions or more complex research or different research methodologies that I haven't been trained in, are not something that I can just jump in and do. And that is where I think that researchers play a really valuable role. And I actually think what the model I think makes sense if we can make it work is researchers having kind of two aspects of one being doing the complex, really hard research that needs somebody trained in a craft because research is a craft, but then acting as a coach for people on the things that are a little bit easier to do or a little bit, kind of maybe it's the kind of things that you would do with in the same way for me as a product manager. There are activities I would give to some of my more junior team members or people or engineers who just want to take on bits of product versus the things I'm going to say for my senior people who understand strategy and understand how to craft principles and understand all of these things more deeply. So I think the more that research can kind of enter this like player coach aspect, I think we'll be better as an industry. I also think that the spots where research is kind of owning owning the research, and I'm saying research a lot, sorry. But basically I think the most dangerous spot to be in is where we say like research goes away and does it and brings back the results. And I think what a lot of people have been calling for and has been misinterpreted as product just wants to take over research is product wants to be involved in research, both from getting the firsthand understanding. And as I said, I've worked with really great researchers. We have gone into user interviews and walked out with two different angles on the same question because I'm looking at it from a different lens than what necessarily someone that's looking at it from a UX lens is coming in with. And so if I had just let the research team go off and do their thing and bring me back the results, I wouldn't have heard those pieces that mean something different. This is also why I advocate for bringing engineers into this research as well, because they hear things that I'm going to miss and that my researcher is going to miss. So I think we should be more of a partner as opposed to battling turf wars.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what you mentioned too takes me back into how I got so deep into research as I was a product manager and I was facilitating sessions between my pod with an engineer designer. And I was like, I love this. This gives me energy. I want to spend all my time here. At its core, how I kind of delineate these things is their skills, right? Research is a skill, product management is a skill and a role, research operations is a skill and a role. And so it's all about how much time do you want to spend in each of those things. Product managers do research, but it's not 100% of their time. Researchers do research, it's going to be a little bit more. Maybe it's 80% of their role versus like 50% or something like that. And so I tend to try and break it down with people in terms of time and also what gives you energy and takes energy away. And I do think that there's...
I want to double down on what you just said of research is a skill and a role. And I think that is like each aspect of that. And I think that's really where we need to think about is like what part of this is the role and what part of this is a skill set that can be completed by varying people.
Correct. Yeah. And one thing you mentioned, Emily, too, I kind of want to just relay is that I think that in times like this, when there is so much change, there's so much out of our control, we can get into scarcity mindset, right? And that's where the pitting against each other comes from is no, we do this, we separate, I do that, you do that. But I actually think it warrants a more coming together. At the end of the day, we're all working for a business. We all have goals. We talked about value. And so it's not us against them. It's how are we united? How do we get to our vision? How do we get to the outcomes as a team? And so it can be hard to reframe like that, especially when things get crazy, because we want to just like shelter and isolate and protect. But it's in these crazy times that I think we have the most power to connection and come together as well. We haven't talked about skills a little bit. As we look ahead to the future, we talked a little bit about business skills and other things like that. What skills do each of you think that folks should be considering focusing on growing within their practice?
I think it's 100% business skills. I mean,
Mm.
we talk a lot about different roles, and I've done all of them too. But particularly in research operations, like that whole role is about scaling something in a business. That's operations is about scaling and facilitating things in a business. And if you're trying to career switch to that from research or from something else and you don't know those things, you are going to be lacking. Um, I think any of these roles, obviously product people, they should know business,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, that's kind of a thing, but it's not assumed. Like Alec said too, in the research world, one of the things like you and we've talked about before is the what is it like to start your own business? How much that really uh, helps you reframe that. I grew up in a small business, and now having
Mm-hmm.
one really helps you put that in the right frame in your mind. And one of the things we've mentioned is going out and taking a workshop on how to start your own business, although I don't recommend freelancing right now because everyone's trying to freelance. But taking something like Ryan Rumsey's Jump Ship workshop, short, sweet, to the point, helps you think about what it is you're doing. Um, yeah, those simple skills will take you a long way.
I did post in the chat for folks the CDO school that Holly is mentioning about. It's Chief Design Officer Skill by Ryan Rumsey. It is a great place. It focuses all about business and design and research. So excellent. Um, anyone else? Yeah. What other skills?
I think it's especially important now, important at any time though, is communication skills and being able to articulate your value, be able to help people, just like rather than making people connect the dots themselves between what you're doing and the value you're providing, being able to connect that for them and being able to help people understand the parts that they need to know, understanding kind of which stakeholders you're talking to, so that then you can message things correctly to them, hit the points that they care
Mm-hmm.
about, help them understand the things that they need to know. Just continuing to work on communication skills, and particularly in reporting out and how you report out on what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually circle back to what Alec mentioned in the beginning of it takes getting to know your organization. When I work with folks, I always make sure to ask them, like when you get to know your stakeholders, understand the business, take the time, meet your stakeholders, ask them what keeps you up at night, what do you care about, how do you make decisions? All of those things will help influence the levers that you use when you're communicating, when you're sharing stories across the business as well. So I absolutely agree. I think there's the hard skills component side of it where it's like understanding business skills, ROI, the language. But then there is also a soft skills component. And that's where I like to play with coaching and talking about influence and communication and stuff like that. And it really is those intersections that really help drive an impact as well. Alec, are there any skills that you think are absolutely critical for folks these days?
I think maybe I'll take this in a bit of a different direction rather than
Yeah.
skills, just general things that we need. But I think one of the biggest pieces that we're really missing is quality relationships.
Mm.
I think this is I saw somebody asked a question about, why is research getting democratized and whatever. And I think there's something unique about the research role that's not true for any of the other roles. And that is that researchers create value indirectly, right? We don't produce designs, we don't write code, we don't ship marketing campaigns, we don't respond to tickets, customer support tickets. We do research to help other people make better decisions, right? And so what that means is, it's kind of implied in that is, everybody does research. We research what restaurant to go to, we research, who we want to go on a date with. Everybody has these skills of inquiry, right? And I think that one of the big missing pieces is a real quality relationship with the people that you're working with, where you are more than colleagues, right? You should really try and aim for being, I don't know if friendship is an appropriate term for the workplace, but something along those lines. Because if they don't trust you, they're not going to bring you into the conversation when they haven't figured things out. They're not going to tell you about the things that they're anxious and worried about. They're not going to tell you about the areas
Yep.
where they think things could go off the rails. And so part of your job is to create those relationships, and it's on you. It's not on them.
Mhm.
Product manager can still do their job adequately without having a relationship with you, but you can't do your job adequately without having a relationship with them. And so that means things like talking about the ball game, or talking about what's going on with the royal family, or talking about what's going on with Twitter, or going out for coffee, or going out for beer, or doing something to the point where, like, again, you could just message each other just to see how things are going and catch up and whatever. And at that point, when you have that with the people you work around you, then you can really achieve your potential as a researcher. Because then you'll be brought in at the right moments. You'll be able to anticipate the issues that are going to come up. And so focusing, I think almost all researchers are more than adequate at interviewing users. Most of us are adequate enough at constructing surveys and digging into analytics and some other things. But we are like 1 out of 10 on relationship building, right? And I think that this is an area where there's huge development that needs to happen. And again, when times get tough and layoffs, get planned, this factors in, right? They're going to shrink the team down into something that's smaller and tight knit, and you're on the outside looking in if you don't have that trusted relationship with them. So I'd say that's a huge thing to work on every quarter. Try and build a new connection that is real with somebody that you work with.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Without trust, there really is no relationship, no partnership. And one thing that I emphasize with clients is that the relationship actually starts with yourself. If you don't understand what you like, what you don't like, what your superpowers are, how you best communicate or receive information, how can you possibly partner with somebody else? You will always be acquiescing to them and what they need. But a true partnership is coming together. They lean in and you lean in as well. So it really starts from the very moment, the first conversation that you have with someone on the team. Yeah. I am seeing a comment just in the chat. I think just because we're here on this topic, are there any team building approaches that any of you would recommend as we're talking about building trust and relationships with people on teams?
I do a lot
Go
of
out for lunch.
Go for lunch, yeah.
For real.
So I work at Cisco, and about half of my remit is events and outreach. And through that, it's a lot of working with other teams, doing research, working with other teams, doing analysis, actually having scheduled meetings where we go over work together, where we talk about what we're doing, that there's fun stuff going on the Miro board that inspires that relationship. And that's even with Cisco being a camera off kind of place, developing those relationships, because like the way I frame some of the things we've been talking about, and I say a lot is, researchers do work with participants, with users. You represent the user. Your users, the users that you can actually help, work with you. Do your research on them, and make it better. Make that relationship better.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we're talking about. And as a metaphor that I often use is creating a user guide for yourself, and then coming together and doing your user research inside of your organization, because that's what we're talking about essentially, is what keeps you, all those are research questions, right? So put on your researcher hat and think about what you want to learn inside of your organization. And there's going to be different levers to be able to do that. Some of them might be going out to lunch in person. Some of them might be a coffee chat or something like that. But depending on what you're trying to learn and the outcome that you're looking to drive, there's different levers that you can pull. So
someone just said,
create
really a user guide for yourself. Someone just said, create a user guide. I have a user guide for myself that I like to give to people. Like, hey, this is
Same.
how I like to interact with people. What's yours?
Yeah, we used to do that with Mind the Product. We had user manuals of me for everyone on the team.
Mhm.
And then we actually redid them during COVID because we realized a lot of us had like our working styles had changed, and you know we've always been relatively remote. But I think it was a really good way to kind of highlight also just some of the differences in the way that we work and the interesting things about us. I think also don't feel like it has to be a big exercise or a big activity to get to know people. Like obviously, if you can do, you know, a team building activity or go to dinner with people or go to lunch with people, that's excellent. But I actually find just like making your meetings 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes and deciding that you're going to spend the first 5 minutes chatting it goes a long way in small little bits over a period of time, because you have that time to just kind of start to get to know each other and understand what's going on and talk about the world and those kinds of things. The hardest thing for me is when it's like back-to-back 30-minute meetings all day long and everyone just like jumps in and tries to like get to the point, decide the thing, get out, move on, because you don't have any of that time to build those connections. I think I'll also say I saw a question in the chat about introverts, and how to do this as an introverted person if you're not an extroverted person. I'm actually very deeply an introvert. People incorrectly assume because I do a lot of public speaking and things like that that I am an extrovert, and I ran a community. How can you be an introvert when you're running a community? Actually, a lot of people that you see public speaking or doing writing, all of those things are solo activities. Like they're very introverted things. And then they actually give people a reason to talk to you. And as an introvert, if you want to be able to build more relationships, but you don't want to start the conversations, if you can find those ways to basically to give a talk or present at a meeting or do something like that within your company. I know that can be really, really difficult, but if you can kind of push through and do that, it starts to give you an opening to talk to people in a controlled manner. Like then you're not having to go and like elbow your way into a conversation full of extroverts where they're all talking over each other and they've all got 1,000 things to say. You have said a thing that then gives people a reason to talk to you, which can be really, really useful. Also, just do it on your own terms. Like if you don't want to network and relationship build in groups of 10, just start with one person and start over Slack or whatever it may be, and just start to do things in a way that makes you feel comfortable. You don't have to match that extrovert energy, bounciness, doing all the things.
Yes. One thing I want to say as a follow-up to that is that as a woman of color, I like background context. I grew up as a transracial adoptee. I grew up in these systems around me where I looked different. I wasn't only in the room. I work with a lot of clients who are like that. We talk a lot about learning the language of the business, fitting into the system. And I think part of that does kind of touch upon assimilation. And I think it is important to remember, everyone that's on the call, is that we are all very unique. We all come from different backgrounds, and you are hired for your organization for a specific reason. So there is like some nuance and fluidity of like, yes, learn the language of the business, be able to fit in and adapt and be able to drive value, but also hold true to your intentions, who you are, what your superpowers are. If you are an introvert, nothing says you need to be an extrovert. I am not, but I'm facilitating this panel right now. And so just remember that there is definitely some fluidity in that. And yeah, hold on to what makes you you and what you enjoy. So I just wanted to mention that for folks. I do want to transition a little bit.
Yeah, for our extrovert friends, please do your introverts a favor and listen, like, you know, like basically like leave some space. So if you're in a meeting and you have someone that you know is more introverted in the room, like maybe actually kind of, obviously not putting them on the spot, but if you can see that it's like they want to contribute but they're holding back, try to help us and give us that space and the opportunity to be able to safely speak up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do want to start to pivot a little bit, looking at the time, and start to open and address some of the questions that we have in the Q&A. We have been talking a little bit about business, so I'll kind of transition to that. There was a question from Allison. Hi, Allison. It's good to see you. What's the best way to learn more business acumen? Not to prove our value, because some of that can be like gaslighting, but to actually bolster our knowledge, our confidence. Does anyone have any suggestions, tools, or resources when it comes to learning business acumen?
There's a lot of
and
different, there's a lot of different courses out there, different things that are coming out around, the basics of business. So I think like basically go to Amazon and Google like, top business books, or just Google what business book should I read? What should an MBA read? And you'll get a lot of stuff that are, like, frankly, a lot of it's classics. A lot of it is, stuff that was written by Michael Porter and stuff that's been written by Seth Godin and people who've been around, Malcolm Gladwell, and people who've been around for a really long time. It's not necessarily brand new thinking, but you can find those books, or if you are not a book reader, you can absolutely find summaries of all of it and explainer videos on YouTube and everything else about all of these different aspects. One that is on the newer side that is, he's a personal friend and I'm a big fan of this work, is Martin Erickson has really been focusing on a concept called the decision stack, and basically trying to help articulate around what strategy actually is and how strategy flows from top to bottom and how it plays into what we're doing as a business, because he's seen it as such a big gap starting in product, but then across kind of all of the product related roles in tech. So you can see decisionstack.com. He's got some things there that I think are really useful and coming out with more regularly.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Emily. Go ahead, Alec.
Yeah, so I think the best way is to try and start a business. I think by far is the best way to do it. It doesn't have to be fancy schmancy. You're not going to build $1 billion company necessarily. But if you try and start maybe try and sell stamps online, or maybe it's a little cafe, or like literally anything, and you'll start to realize what are the important things that you need to think about in order to make it successful. I think that's by far the best way. Some other stuff that I think are really good resources, especially if you work at large companies. Every company by law that's publicly traded has certain documents they need to file on a regular basis with the SEC that are publicly available to everyone. Each one of those documents outlines all of the important metrics for each business. They legally are required to outline what are the things they are concerned about, what are the expected areas of growth, what are the expected headwinds they might face, right? What is their plan? So those are, if you really want to get down to like the nitty gritty details of the stuff that matters, it's in these documents. So you can check those out on the SEC's website. For me, I also really like reading, random economics books from time to time, maybe like one a year. They can be quite dense. But there's like a bunch of different ways. I think the key thing is you are consistently engaging in the material or in the experience of making business stuff. And I think the other thing that's important to understand is like, I think there's a lack, it's true in tech in general, but there's a lack of understanding around how value is created. Like, how is it that our quality of living tends to go up and up and up over time? Why we become wealthier and wealthier, right? There's recent stats that have come out that the middle class in the US is shrinking, but it's not because people are getting poor. It's because more and more people are in the upper middle class, right? And the proportion of Americans that are earning over $100,000 a year is like a third now. It's like way higher than it's ever been, right? And so what is the reason for this? It's like businesses fundamentally are about taking capital and labor and resources and turning them into something that's worth more than the sum of their parts, right? And so being able to kind of internalize that is really important. And I think the best way you can do that is by actually trying to do that stuff, right? Try to run a business and you'll learn a lot. So that's kind of my main teaching.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. I am seeing there is some questions that came through, is how can we start to speak about our work, value, impact? There was a question directed towards you, Alex. Please share a few tips on how we can articulate things like impact and value. Do you have any recommendations around that?
Yeah, for sure. So first thing, this always shocks me. You go and you talk to them before you start the project, right? Like before you even plan any projects, before you start working on anything, right? Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are the things that you're stressed about? What are the numbers that we're trying to hit, right? And you should be able to tie that back to like financial goals of the company, basically. Like you should have an intuitive understanding of this stuff, right? Our retention is really, really bad. Okay, cool. Well, like, good to know. So projects that relate to working on retention will lead to more revenue because we're churning less customers, that kind of stuff. We just tend to do this stuff backwards. It's like, well, I did the valuable work. Now I have to show the value, communicate the value. It's like, are you sure you did the valuable work? Right? Because if you and the people you're working with, again, we create value indirectly. If you and the people that you're working with, while the project is going on, aren't already seeing the value, right? Something is wrong. And we need to listen to the wisdom of the system of like, damn, they just don't see it. It's not working. You're basically implicitly diagnosing a disease within your practice. So like, listen to that. It means you have a problem, and then get started working on it. It starts with having a conversation. And that's the key thing. I think the communication stuff, it's almost an afterthought. If you're crushing it with the work that you're doing, nobody is going to care about your reports because they're already moving on and making decisions based on the stuff that you're doing. They're in your interviews, watching and listening. They're asking for your feedback. They don't care about the report. They're not even in the presentation. They're already moving on and excited about the next project that you're about to do, right? And so that's kind of, I mean, maybe you probably should write the report so you can socialize with people beyond the immediate people you're working with. Don't get me wrong. But the people that you're directly working with, are you close? Are you part of one unit, cohesive unit? That's where you're seeing the problem. It's not about communication at the end of the day for most of the time, in my opinion. So just get closer with them and understand how their work translates to like what the VP of product wants, which translates to what the CEO wants, which translates to everybody getting promoted and being happy. Then everything becomes super clear.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I do want to highlight is take a look at, we talked about a few different outputs here. Earning calls is huge. Watching your all hands meetings when they're actually presenting like the spreadsheet and basically conveying and telling the story about the business and how it's operating. When you first started a role, asking the person who hired you, why was I hired? What am I expected to do? Because connected to that will be something related to revenue or engagement or something that you then, that's kind of the bucket that where all your work will kind of be bucketing up and supporting. So it really does first start with a conversation.
Earning calls are a great idea, by the way. Plus one to that.
Yes, for sure. There's a question in here about how do we measure research KPIs? Is there any tool to support this? There are tons of research impact frameworks that are available. You will see one coming out for me very shortly within the next month. But really it starts at the core. You can't measure what you don't know. So let's define what impacts means to us first and foremost. Identify the frequency that you're going to measure that, and there's going to be tons of different ways that you can measure depending on your business and organization. So typical researcher, it depends.
I just dropped a great article by Jake Burkhart on how to measure quality and quantity of research impact, and he's got a nice framework in there that he pulled from a book that we both got from Bridget about thinking about impact. It's so hard to quantify if somebody read something and then turns around and uses it in their work, because you can't go ask them, did this influence what you were talking about just now? Did this influence what you were talking about just now? But being able to kind of change the framework that people have around how they're measuring the impact of my researchers, thinking, is it conceptual? Is it a symbolic? impact, which is what a lot of it is, which seems like you're doing research for projects in flight. But the thing that everyone wants to get to is that instrumental changing decisions and directions, those kind of things. But just being able to have a playing field where you and your boss and their boss agree on what the rules are. And like you just said, you do that when you first get hired. That is the only time you're going to get to do that before your next review, or maybe ever, where you say, this is what we're working on. This is how it should be measured. This is what the expectations of the role are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have time for one last question. I do see a question around how does the market look in terms of user research jobs? How's the market look in terms of jobs in general? Does anyone have anything to kind of add there?
I want to take this because I want to say that you can survive today's job market.
Yes.
I am a niche hire, a very niche hire, being a high up research operations person, which means I'm like an enterprise hire. I looked for a long time. If you're looking right now, you might look for a long time. You need to be prepared for that. You need to run your house like a business, but understand that this is not you. This is not you. This is the market. Reframe, turn this into your job. Everyone always says, turn this into your job, but do it with other people, because if not, you're going to get discouraged over and over. And that really destroys your self-worth. Get a group of people who are also looking for jobs, share tips, meet every other week, go through your stuff, have them help you curate your next presentation for these types of jobs that you're going to apply for. You know, research in this industry, but you might look for a while. I looked for over 2 years. You might look for a while. Everyone needs to be prepared for it being a hiring market for another year or two.
Yeah. I would emphasize it's the time to get hired is definitely extended a little bit longer than typical. Again, I think it is when you encounter a roadblock, reflecting on it's not you. It is the business is looking for something very specific, just as you are looking for something very specific. And so I often encourage people to ground in yourself. What are you looking for? Create your rubric for your interview process. Is the business meeting your needs or is it not? Because I think it can be very easy to turn again into that scarcity mindset. But there are resources for folks as you're starting to kick off your search, as you're exploring, as you're hoping to learn more. Do want to be mindful of time. I do want to pass it back to Ben. Thank you to each of you for chatting with me today.